we have Father Emil here with us. He grew up in Oak Park, Illinois, in Ascension Parish. He received a bachelor's degree in history from the University of Illinois in 1986.
Thank you, Monique.
Thanks, Monique. Father Emil worked in commercial banking for 11 years until August 1999, when he entered seminary to begin studies for the priesthood and was ordained here in the Archdiocese of Chicago in 2004. His first assignment was St. Clement Parish, right here, until 2010.
And I still have my name tag when I was the associate pastor.
Excellent. Thanks for remembering it tonight. He served here with us until 2010, when he was sent to St. Paul University for studies in canon law. On January 15th in 2013, Father Fajardo joined Holy Name Cathedral as a resident, where he regularly celebrates Mass and confessions and assists in other parishes of the Archdiocese when available, like the Shrine, all while engaging in his new job as a judge of the Metropolitan Tribunal. In July of 2017, he was asked to be the Cardinal's delegate for St. James Chapel at the Pigley Pastoral Center. In 2021, Father Fajardo was named the rector of the National Shrine of St. Francis Xavier Cabrini. We also have with us Sister Laura Baldini this evening. She is a missionary sister of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, the same order that Mother Cabrini founded here, and she has dedicated her life to spreading Christ's love globally since joining the MSC in the year 2000. Born in Argentina, she served in diverse roles across Argentina, Italy, Brazil, Swaziland, and the U.S., and is currently based at the National Shrine of Francis Xavier Cabrini. She coordinates outreach and pastoral activities. With a master's in chemical engineering, casually, Sister Laura is an educator in chemistry, physics, English, and math. Just, why not? And she's also an enthusiastic catechist and pastoral leader. Her work, particularly in the marginalized communities, focuses on faith and spiritual development, revealing her dedication to mission integration and support. Characterized by kindness, joy, curiosity, and an eagerness to engage with different cultures, Sister Laura is known for her effective communication and listening skills. Her core values, honesty, commitment, joy, courage, and passion, underscore her mission to embody and share Jesus' teachings in all aspects of her life. Sister Laura enjoys simple pleasures such as long walks, singing, cross-stitching, and socializing over Malbec wine, dark chocolate, Italian gelato, and reflecting her rich cultural heritage and diverse interests. Thank you, Sister Laura. And then lastly, we have St. Clement's very own Father Matt. Last but not least, he grew up in St. Bernadette in Evergreen Park on the south side. He was raised in your typical small Irish and Polish family, being one of 8 children, 7 siblings, 5 brothers, and 2 sisters. He entered seminary after graduating from Benedictine University, and he was ordained in 2016. His first assignment was at Christ the King for 4 years before coming here to St. Clement, where he has served since 2020. During his time at St. Clement, he's overseen numerous rounds of our RCIA class, helping to bring countless individuals into the fullness of the Catholic faith. He's helped assist and guide our young adult board as they prepare and plan all events for our young adult community here in the parish, and has served as a spiritual director for many. We are sad and happy that he will be beginning his next assignment on the South Side again as administrator at St. Catherine of Alexandria in July. Father Matt is a lover of many things, one being trying new restaurants. He's an avid movie buff. I promise you there are few movies that he has not seen. He's a fan of all the beauty that can be found in the ordinary. He enjoys bringing people together over shared meals and a little bit of friendly competition through game nights, and is always down for a nice walk. So Sister Laura, I think you found a walking buddy. We'll go ahead and kick on our evening with just a couple of pre-prepared questions that our panelists will cycle through, and then after we get through those few questions, we'll open up the floor for any questions that you may have. Is that microphone on?
It is now.
Okay, awesome. Yay. So I'll just ask very simply, first question, initial thoughts that you had on the movie, initial synopsis, any ideas, any thoughts?
Well, so I'll start since I'm holding the microphone, so that way I'll turn it over to them who are much more in depth. I feel outclassed being on this panel. But my initial thought is it was such a powerful story worth telling. St. Cabrini's story is something that I think most people don't know. And so the most important thing was that a lot of people got to see her story. I mean, I heard about her. I think it did a good job of portraying the poverty that was inherited in New York, and if you didn't know, like that sense of racism that was an anti-immigrant spirit that was inherent in the times, and all of the no's that she had to overcome in order to do the ministry that she wished to overtake. So I think the film did a good job portraying the poverty, portraying the no's that she overcame, and that sense of her fiery spirit.
So adding up on what you said, I find the movie portrayed Mother Cabrini very, very well. Her personality. I mean, it's one of the best portraits of Mother Cabrini, humanly speaking, that I've seen in my life. I watched it 3 times, and I can see that over time, many suggestions were made about it. So this movie was a tailored movie. I mean, it's for all audiences to perceive how powerful the message of faith and hope can be. So that's my first impression of the movie.
2 years ago, when we were invited to see the product as it had finished filming and editing had begun, we were privileged to see it in its raw state. And if I'm not mistaken, we were given a movie that, unedited, was approaching 3 hours. It didn't have the details because it still had the green screen. There was no music, so the very first showing was a very raw movie. And over time, I believe I've seen it 3 or 4 times. A lot of editing. First, the details in the background, then the next time the music was being added, and then the final time, the final edited version. And I think what Mr. Eustace Wolfington, the executive producer of the program, of the movie, was talking about trying to depict a woman who did something and was inspired. So it was a very deliberate editing that they asked of the group to show her as a person walking the street would have encountered her. You know, if you knew nothing about who this woman was, who is this person getting in the way? That was a perspective, I understood it, that they were trying to get at, as if you saw her for the very first time. And therefore, you should be asking questions, you should be edified, you should be irritated. But who is this person?
Excellent, thank you. Sister Laura, this one might be more specific to you might have the expertise on it, but could you tell us a little bit more about Mother Cabrini and her order, so the Missionary Sisters of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, who she was, how they are core tenets of that group?
Okay, so straight to the foundation.
Yes.
So,
I did. Go on.
So Mother Cabrini founded the Missionary Sisters of the Sacred Heart of Jesus in 1880 when she was about 30 years old, after a rough journey. Let me just say it that way. She tried 3 times before to join communities, being the last one the hardest. But finally, she was asked to found the first missionary female congregation because there was none in the time. And Pope Leo authorized her only 7 years after the foundation to go overseas, to go in a mission at Gentes, as it's called, being the first place here in the United States. She arrived in 1889 in New York. And just there, the movie portrays us very well. And the Cabrini method was just walking in the streets and meeting life there. So she quickly realized about the reality and the love of Christ that was compelling her was the one driving her toward orphans and prostitutes at the very first thing, and then healthcare, and then prison, and then even having a kind of social approach into the crisis of immigration in those days. Then she came, just jumping a lot in time, she came to Chicago and because she was invited by the Servite Fathers to run a school, actually, not to found a school. She founded, she just arrived here to run it with the sisters in 1902. And then in 1905 is when she, by the request of Bishop Quigley, she buys the Perry Hotel and builds and founds the Columbus Hospital. The Mother Cabrini here in Chicago, just to give you a hint in the movie, really, just to put some peace in your hearts, in your minds, that scene of the fire is here in Chicago. It happened here in Columbus. And Dr. Murphy is a Chicagoan. So those two very relevant situations in Mother Cabrini happened here in Chicago. So the movie needed to do that for purposes of synthesis. So then Mother Cabrini, when arrives here in this neighborhood, she used to come to this very church. Actually, I learned today that when Columbus was born, opened the doors, even St. Clement's opened the same year, no?
Well, the parish was founded in 1905. The church wasn't built until after her death. So the church was completed in 1919, but she would have been going into the school.
Oh, okay. You see? So, and then this was, here is when she opens in Chicago. She opens more to a reality not only of Italians. She sees here the global migration crisis that the United States was going through. And she has that generosity of heart. She opens to embrace the whole reality, not only the crisis in Italy, which she found very, very big in New York. And then she, of course, her method was always to go into a very, to start with a neighborhood who could provide the means to build other facilities in other unprivileged neighborhoods. And that is how Columbus Extension is born, and the sisters also serve there. Mother Cabrini moved within New Orleans, also Los Angeles, Seattle in the United States, and then she also travels to Nicaragua from the United States, Argentina, Brazil, Spain, Italy already running, and France, and the United Kingdom, I think. All those were her foundations, and always using the same method. And then what I can just wrap up and say, before arriving to Chicago, and she died here in December 22nd, 1917. She was from Seattle. She was still at work. And then when she arrived here, she breathed her last here in Chicago. I believe there are many other things to say, but let me just stop here.
One of the things to remember about Mother Cabrini as well was that in the movie, it wasn't very obvious, but there were scenes where she fell in the river and she was drowning. And it was only when she was pulled out of it that she realized that ultimately she had to conquer her fear of running water. So this was a woman who was petrified of running water and still made the effort to cross the ocean 27 times. Sorry. She conquered her fear because God's work had to be done, right? And this is a real fear that she had. And imagine crossing the ocean, and you're in third class. It's steerage. That's what she wanted to be with the poor. That's all she could afford ultimately. And she conquered her fear, going back and forth, whatever it took to do God's work. So I like to think of her as a patron saint of travelers too, because who isn't afraid of traveling to a certain extent, right? Right? And also another thing about Mother Cabrini was that her greatest desire was to see the human dignity in each person. So I was talking with some of the missionaries of charity of Mother Teresa, and they said their apostolate is very much inspired by St. Francis Cabrini, because the missionary sisters were at this shrine on Sunday, and we've talked over the years, and they said, no, it's very deliberate. The same way Mother Cabrini penetrated the world, that's how Teresa of Calcutta did it. As soon as she got off the train in Calcutta, what was the first thing she did? She picked up a dying man on the guard. Straight to the problem. What can I do to help alleviate
found the missionaries of charity. She said, I want to do for people in India the same things Cabrini did for the Italians in America. So it's like the connection that Father is underscoring is real.
Excellent, thank you. Father, you kind of just hit on this, but I think a big question, at least that I had from this movie, and I think a lot of us maybe here together have this question as well, but what can we, or maybe what should we learn from Mother Cabrini's example? What is our call to action by her model?
Be your sister.
Well, for me, obviously, the first thing is that we're all called at different levels of participation. All valid levels of participation. Not everyone, as Mother Teresa of Calcutta said, not everyone can do what I do, but what you can do it, right? So the lesson we learned is that as she, in the movie, it was depicted that she spoke to these very wealthy individuals. And her point was, you should give something. You can do something, because the sisters were going to be the one doing the penetration of the world. They're going into the very uncomfortable things. And that was the whole point of going to the New York Times, to expose the horrifying conditions. People were isolated, right? So what we can, a takeaway from the movie is that everyone is called. There's something we can do. And where are we in life? Can we do something? In fact, we should do something. We must do something. There's an imperative, but it's always because of the gospel, right? It is. St. Francis Cabrini was inspired by the gospel, the imitation of Christ, right? So whatever one can do it, right? I think I'm going to be corrected, but I remember in Spanish there's an expression, para servir, sirve. You know, you're going to serve, begin. Just like Mother Teresa of Calcutta. She picked up the first man dying in the gutter, and that began the great missionaries of charity. Francis Cabrini, 23 times back and forth, whatever it took. That's what she could do.
I'll leave you for that, sister, because you have the most to say. But yeah, what struck me from the film, and something that I feel challenged by and encouraged by, is the sense of boldness, like the sense of bold ingenuity and thinking outside of the box, and this challenge then to really challenge the status norm and to not just accept things for how they are, but how they ought to be, and like that sense of coloring outside of the lines and being willing to go, to do what needs to be done in order for us to complete the only two commandments that matter: love God and love neighbor. And so that sense of boldness, the sense of originality, the sense of ingenuity that Mother Cabrini had, I think is something that we should all strive for, and something that not allowing things to get in the way of the gospel.
To me, the movie is part of a larger process of me as a missionary. Since I arrived in Chicago, and this movie kind of confirmed me many things. But long story short, what I will say is, what I saw in the movie and really caught me is something that is not so, it's not so showed or visible, probably intentionally by the producer, but the love of Jesus that is behind that, the extreme love of Jesus that is because many times when I was probably sharing with Father Ramil, I was telling him, hadn't been she in love, she would have broken. For so many rejections she had, and people just looking upon their shoulders and stay your place all the time, and that to me was helped me see that particular thing that Mother Cabrini really when you go to the shrine and see I can do all things in Christ who gives me strength. That's it.
Yeah, beautiful, thank you. Those were the questions that we had pre-prepared for today. So I'll go ahead and open it up to anyone here in the crowd that has a question. I'm not sure how much feedback we'll get from between the microphones, so we'll try it, but if we have to, we might just have to pivot to being loud and bold and shouting your question out.
It's not really a question, but what the movie inspired in me is how current it is to the migrant situation. And it just inspired me to want to do more. slightly, to support migrants. We have a lot of migrants in our area outside the grocery stores. And if I don't have money, I bring clothes. I just am so discouraged by the mean-spiritedness toward, not in my community or in my circles, but, so my only question would be, did she really confront the Pope? Like,
Let me just tell the end of the story. They became very good friends. You know that sometimes when you have these confrontations, I think that they should have had some kind of, but when you have this kind of sharing is when you make you have a real relationship with him. My Mother Cabrini didn't have it easy with him and with church in those days because, as I was telling before, she wasn't supposed to be a missionary. Women were not supposed to be missionary. And I believe that Pope Leo had a hard time because he had to really be a visionary. And Mother Cabrini was also known by someone called Bishop Scalabrini, and he already, St. John Baptist Scalabrini, he started here in the United States, and he was the one whispering into Pope Leo's ears that there was urgent need here to come. And I believe that those words, plus Mother Cabrini's boldness, and some other, the church in Italy, if you happen to be here, is like a small thing. Mother Cabrini was also well known up there in Lombardy. So a combination of things made her get that positive response from Pope Leo. But I bet that they have discussions that were very, very hard. But finally, I believe that those interventions and the Holy Spirit playing around made it possible. But yeah, I bet there was a discussion there. Though Mother Cabrini had her own mind and spoke, she had that beautiful balance in finding in the Holy Father the voice of God. If you could read her books, that's what she said. It's the voice of God to me. And she gave up a childhood dream, something that grew up with her. So imagine how strong that voice was.
thank you, Sister.
Let me add to that real quick. It's a movie, and the reality is that Pope Leo XIII was the great pope of social justice, because he entered the world of social justice by his encyclical Rerum Novarum. Now, when you're seeing, he became pope in 1878, and all of a sudden, here's a pope that says, well, what about the workers? There's this guy called Karl Marx agitating and causing trouble, and what about the rights of the workers? And so Pope Leo XIII really began the social awareness of the rights of workers. And maybe the discussion in the movie about why there seemed to be a conflict was that there were certain limits and structures that had never seen this before. How can we make this work for Mother Cabrini? So I think in talking or in depicting the sort of difficulty she had, an interpretation that might come out was that it was about conflict, and it really wasn't. It was, how do we make an institution that had never seen anything like this possible? And remember, in the 1880s, 1878, 1880s, 1890s, you had anarcho-syndicalists terrorizing different parts of Italy and the industrialized world. So to be a factory worker, to be a unionist, meant you're a terrorist. Now this is the European experience. All right? So the context there is there's a lot of skepticism among the old class. And Mother Cabrini was saying, but these people also need to be served. How do we do this? And so that was perhaps the conflict that was being seen. How can we make this work? Right? With the structures in place, and how do we change it if we have to? Right?
And I didn't see it as a negative, I didn't mean it as I just thought, how bold.
Right.
Did she really keep going back? Yeah.
Actually, in one of our talks before, I think it's Holy Name, that the topic did come up about the conflict. So it was an awareness on our parts to try to place it in the proper perspective. There's no denying that there was some sort of conflict or some sort of discussion, but it's to just say, it wasn't quite what people were thinking.
Thank you.
Martina?
Yes, I can.
Along those lines, Father, how do you account the relationship with the Archbishop of New York?
Sister can talk to that one. All I could think of when I was watching the movie was, he's wearing that outfit wrong. That's the way I would wear it.
So, that relationship was the very first one that Mother Cabrini had with the church in the United States. And it was a tough one. It was a very tough one. When she arrived here, it was authentic that what happened, what the movie depicted, it was real. Mother Cabrini found no one there, and actually the bishop was ready to send her back the next day. And that scene about, and the real scene that she does show in the letter, that happened. So she had to stand her ground, and he used common sense, I think. The only tool she had was common sense, and the Pope is sending me here, I stay. So I think that determination was the one that really shocked Bishop Corrigan. At the beginning was very, very difficult. Actually, the father, the priest that you say, I don't recall his name, was not the father, were the CABRINI fathers. I mean, they were a congregation, that welcomed, not only a priest.
In many ways, it reminded me of Dorothy Day's experience as she began her ministry and the work. It's just a reminder that the church is slow to change, and that some of the hierarchies is slow to change and slow to embrace things, and also the reality of the era and the very divided church, and also new to America. Catholicism in America was not very popular at that time and era. You had political parties that were literally dedicated to being anti-Catholic, and so he was walking a very fine political line too. And so like that, just not to completely just embrace him, but at the same time to explain some of the behaviors. He was trying to navigate a very difficult political situation with somebody who was a troublemaker for the good. Yeah.
Yes, and we need to see the situation, the social role of women. So for him was also a struggle to understand that, that teeny tiny Italian woman took him down.
And I think also, to follow what Father Matt said, keep in mind that Archbishop Corrigan, as a son of an Irish immigrant, had seen that discrimination by the old Brahmin class of the English-descended Americans, and their advantage was they spoke English. So whatever kind of problem they had in the United Kingdom transferred here, and now the Irish were at least getting accepted, and now all of a sudden you got another wave, and this time they didn't speak English and they were Catholic, and as Father Matt said, there's a very delicate balancing act he had to do. So it's not to excuse any of that, but again, as Sister said, the context of the time required a lot of diplomacy, and as we probably know, there's a lot of backroom deals. And I think the movie nicely depicted kind of those soft threats. You really don't want to go down that road, Archbishop. You really don't want to do that. And it happens today, it happens in all things. So just again, the circumstances of the times. Oh, and also, 5 points. I asked Eustace and his team about that. That was a real place, and they had pictures of that exact neighborhood. And they were talking in one of the programs they had. That was America for these people. They heard all about America, and that's what they walked into. Those are based on photographs. They researched it very well. To think of something like 5 points and that sort of filth in America, it's just inconceivable.
Sister, I was wondering, one of the things I was interested in the movie, of course, with that, they're trying to develop this, but those young sisters that came over with her, they didn't get any personality in the movie, but they would have to have been as brave and crazy as she was. and it was a small group. I mean, historically, like, how many came with her? That first beginning, it only showed maybe 7 or 8 sisters
And
the whole time in the movie. So I'm sure one of the things she had to do was grow the order
yes.
also.
Yes, so because that is part of the strategy she used. At first, okay, the institute developed very quickly in Italy. That was, fresh foundations have that thing. Plus, Mother Cabrini's personality was very attractive, and then that is how the way she was living Jesus, I would say, attracted so many young women there. Many of them were educated very well and spoke more than one language. So among the sisters you see there was a certain sister, Gabriella Linati. She was the daughter of a very wealthy person. She was well educated, so she knew her English very well. Mother Cabrini used that ability to start her communications here. But she had already leadership there in Italy. And when she came here, let me think. I believe there were like 6 or 7 sisters, Mother Cabrini in there. And then once they were established, other came. And Mother Cabrini was very practical in those. I will just reveal some family stories here. She used to write, say, send me so and so, and because she knew them, and say, I need someone who can manage English or who can teach music or who can, because this is the thing. So then, based on the needs she was finding on the ground, that is how she was calling for more. And then some at the beginning the congregation was mainly Italian-born or Italian-American-born women, but then it opened up, and then you get sisters from Irish origin or German or English. You get French, so you get other people, and this is how the community is now. The community is very diverse. So we're fine.
Yeah, no.
And we had a question in the back. Yeah.
The film may not have covered everything, but you mentioned Father Leo the 13th, Reverend Alarm, but also Leo the 13th wrote a very short piece that was fairly powerful too. It begins, Saint Michael, defend us in battle, be our safeguard against the wickedness and snares of the devil. So Mother Cabrini was a religious sister, and Leo the 13th was fairly religious too, I believe. And what did both Leo want from her, and what did Mother Cabrini want in terms of the salvation of souls of the people that she cared for?
Let me just reveal to you this one. Mother Cabrini motto when it comes to education, it was good Christians and good citizens. So indeed for her, besides what we understand about empowering by educating, for her was very important the faith component on that one. She was urged for everybody to know love, to know the love of Jesus, to know that Jesus loved them so that they deserve the best of the best. Mother Cabrini always doesn't make a separation between salvation of soul and providing dignity. It's like goes together. It goes together. There's no separation. It's like us. It's when we think about like a holistic approach. As an example, as missionaries, we say we feed the stomach and then we speak about Jesus. Yeah, you don't speak about Jesus in an empty stomach. So Mother Cabrini combined those things with, and she didn't make a distinction between salvation of soul and making people really have that experience of Jesus, as well as dignity combined.
I would say that if I was going to critique the movie, one of the flaws I would see is that it doesn't portray as much that deep love that Sister mentioned that Sister had, that Mother would have had for Jesus. And so like if I was to critique the movie a little bit, it would be that sense of love of Jesus is not as powerfully conveyed as it could have been. And for sure, I would say that nobody does what sister does or what mother did, because without having that deep love of Christ in their heart.
It is actually kind of funny because sister and I were talking about how there were different cuts of the movie, and as Father Matt mentioned, that very subtle but deliberate attempt to show her and the connection with the Lord was at one point cut out, right? Maybe they'll have a director's cut or something, but there was one scene in particular, I think it would have satisfied practically anyone that noticed, why is she not praying? Who is she? What drives her, right? What drives her? But again, maybe to have like a counterpoint to Father Matt, it was probably pretty deliberate. They wanted people to see, who is this person? Who is this person I'm seeing? They're really irritating me. And so it was from a one-on-one horizontal perspective, which allows us to then inquire, well, who is this person and what motivates her, right? Perhaps, I don't know.
Oh, right here, yes, go ahead.
Before I get to my question, I just want to make a comment that my husband brought to my attention at our table, and that is we're grateful for the meal we had today, and probably St. Frances Cabrini would be smiling because she's very humble, and she'd say, "That's great, you did a meal in honor of St. Teresa, rather than spaghetti and meatballs and ravioli." Very humble, she would have thought that. So my point is, I heard the word bold being used about her. And when I watched the movie, I never got that impression. Because I think boldness to me is a little sense of negativity. I looked at it as perseverance. She never gave up. She kept trying and trying. And I don't think, boldness is kind of like sometimes you become outwardly look vocal or do things that are not appropriate. But she just wouldn't give up. She just said, okay, didn't work. I'm going to persevere. I'm going to go try this again and try this again. So, that's the thing that I got out of it, that we can apply to our everyday lives, be perseverance.
I know, I've seen your hand up for a little while, go ahead.
You were my history 71. So.
Ah, there you go.
2 points. Unfortunately for most Americans, nuns is Cheech and Chong doing Sister Mary Elephant. Have you got any feedback as to what people outside of the Catholic community have seen the movie and what is their opinion? That's number one. The second point is Americans have a tendency to say they get their history from the movies. I saw Gandhi, I know everything about India. So with this one, it's kind of interesting because I have a list of 5 orders of nuns that came here to work in the Polish community. I'm sure the same thing happened in Serbian, Irish. The only difference being is Mother Cabrini was able to go back to the Italian government and say, hey, you got to support these people. Poles were in a different situation. There was no Poland, so she couldn't go back to the Germans, the Russians, or the Austrians and say, hey, don't support my people. They'd say, tough. So are there any, I know they don't, sometimes you make sequels. Is there any plans for any sequels?
Sister's putting it together.
I'm trying. Actually, I never heard any feedback of anybody who's not Christian, at least, or Catholic. So I cannot address that one.
Although, I'll address it. At the last...
Could you use the microphone, please?
At the last screening, we had a Q&A, and one of the persons who complained about, who happened to be a friend of mine, I have to say, the main complaint was, I will give this movie a 96, but the 4% that's missing is, where was she praying? How do we know that this is a Catholic woman? All right, that was the complaint. Well, when the director and the executive producer were talking, they said they were marketing this in a very anonymous manner for precisely the reason that they wanted anyone to see it. And when they had shown it to different targeted groups, the opinion was very positive, right? These are non-Christians, right? They said that this was a very intriguing woman and that they were marketing it, they wanted to see their reactions. Okay? Now keep in mind, the original cut that I saw the first time was almost 3 hours. So they were drastic in their cutting. But, yeah.
So I just happened to look it up. It has a 98% audience score on Cabrini. Now, it's only made $19 million, so like, it's maybe only Catholics voting, but it is audience score and Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, and sorry, and I just want to add a little bit on top of that. I believe that I talked personally with Mr. Walthington, and when he was saying to me is the purpose is to make her, how can I say, provoking in that sense for people that don't even know Jesus. So it's like, how that woman can do that, and I mean, what is the strength that is driving her? It's like, I like to see it this way. It's a little bit like Pope Francis puts, like, go to the peripheries of the church and speak to people that is not even within the church. Go that way, go to them, and they need to be like curious about her. They need to ask themselves questions. Who's that one? As Father said. So I believe that this is a deliberate intention that Mr. Wolfington had, and it's in that sense. I hope I'm not being exaggerated, but it's evangelizing.
Peggy, I've seen your hand.
Yeah, I mean, I was on this topic of her not praying or seeing this, right? She was modeling Jesus. Her whole life was modeling Jesus. Jesus didn't, I mean, yes, Jesus did preach, but she was modeling him. She was showing love to everybody. And that was what was important, not seeing her praying or receiving communion and going to Mass. And so if we would just model Jesus and show the love, I think that's the message of the movie. And one of the lines that she said at least twice to people who were in crossroads was, "It's your choice." And that's what God gave us, was free will. It's your choice. And that really hit me when she said that. She wasn't preaching to them saying, you should be doing this, don't do that. She said, it's your choice. And that's what God has given us, is our choice.
Yeah. And it was for her too. So she was giving from her own experience of God. She made choices.
Yes, I just want to add on to what Peggy was saying, and I agree. When I first went, I knew a little bit of the feedback of people that went. So I was not sure I wanted to go because it didn't have the aspect of Jesus or her praying. But I was blown away. I thought it was an extremely powerful movie. I agree with what Peggy says. And another way of looking at the movie, if you look at a poem, it's not just the lines and the stanzas that make a poem powerful. It's the white lines around the stanzas that make you reflect on what is not being said. So if you look at this movie that way, Jesus, God, was throughout this movie in every second of the movie.
In response to the feedback, I do know that it has been very well received, very high reviews, even by secular groups. It's gotten very high ratings. I did a little bit of background research, so outside of the church realm, it's been very well received. In fact, surprisingly, some critics wanted to not like it as much as they did and gave it a very high review. I will say the other thing I did want to add, I'm kind of surprised to hear that. See, I did not find it that way as far as, I thought it was her being extremely spiritual. I found her extremely relatable. The fact that she wasn't this pious, I felt I could relate to that. She modeled that you just have to do, and that's what Jesus did. And she didn't seem daunted by anything. And her biggest thing to me that really stood out in the movie was the action. It was all in action. And that's what really, to me, that's your prayer life can do that too. You don't have to pray in the chapel or in the shrine. You pray with action just as well, or better maybe. But the other little morsel that I took away from the movie was the dignity. Dignity that she gave to people that had not seen a morsel of that. that just blew me away. The one scene where she says to sister, you know, we're not gonna use that, you know, that cheap burlap, they deserve better than that, even though they couldn't afford, you know, they had 2 nickels to rub together. I found, and I've since found more, that that's really the way she was, that she kept lifting people up and you know, and molding them and giving them confidence and self-confidence to feel. It was, yeah, that's what I did.
Yeah, if I may say something to that, sorry. No, I think while you speak, and if there's I mean, at least I don't have that, is the tendency of separating things, but isn't deep spirituality, deep humanity? Why are we separating it? It goes, because it's one. At least in our own human experience, we are deeply human and deeply spiritual. So sometimes just going back to what you said, and sometimes is what do we experience as prayer? We can indeed, we need that time of quiet. We need that in every relationship we do. In our main one, we do. Indeed, we do. Then prayer is also when you see Jesus in her or in him. So and if you see that's also prayer. So this is what when Wayne was asking. This is what I wanted to say. The very deep spirituality that is within humanity. So this is.
One of my favorite lines from the movie was when she says, "Open your eyes. This is who we serve." And I'm really glad that Father Matt brought up Dorothy Day, because after I had finished Robert Maynard's biography about Mother Cabrini, I began The Long Loneliness. And then it occurred to me that their timelines kind of intersected. Well, they were alive at the same time at certain points. And so I'm wondering what you guys all think, if they had ever interacted, what would that be like? Where would they share common ground and where would they disagree?
That's a good question.
We believe that they are interacting, right, in heaven.
Right.
Yeah, so like we believe they are interacting in heaven, right? But I think that the drive for an earthy love of God and neighbor, as Sister's been talking about, and so like that sense of loving God and loving your neighbor at the same time is something that they both would have shared, and that sense of cutting through a lot of the red tape and a lot of the structures and strictures in order to do that love, to perform that love for others. I think that's something they both would have shared. I think, you imagine them working together in the streets and probably accomplishing the same things. I think they would have gotten along.
I think, no, I know, because I've studied both Dorothy Day and Mother's works, that prayer was primacy. They always began with prayer. Dorothy Day and the Catholic worker movement was very much in tune with, say, for example, liturgical movement. They would always, she very much, with Virgil Michael, taught prayer is important. So pray the divine office, at least though that which is permissible for lay folk, because obviously it's too complicated. Back in the 30s and 40s, it's too complicated, but there are versions of the divine office that she had Catholic worker movement use, right? And to use the missal, pray the Mass. She was very much in line of praying. And obviously, we would presume Mother Cabrini, who is a religious sister of the Sacred Heart, she had a deep, deep prayer life. I think to maybe encapsulate everything, there would be no distinction. It's just that the genius of each one allows Catholicism to be shared, because Catholicism is love of God, love of neighbor. And so Mother began it in her own way in Italy, with teaching, with whatever apostolic work she was given. Dorothy Day was the Catholic worker movement. So if you want to meet the common point, it was prayer life. It begins in prayer, and then therefore it begins, then allows the genius to develop, because there's no one cookie cutter apostolic work. Everyone, as I said earlier, everyone has a place. And in that place, Christ can be brought, right? So there's no conflict, there's no distinction. It's always love of God, love of neighbor. But it does begin in prayer.
Actually, I love the origin of words. So disciple is actually that. You need to listen, and to listen, you need to be quiet. And not being silent, and not being silent, being quiet. Quiet. So this is when the Lord gets to talk with you, He has to say. And here comes a little bit of my own personal experience. This is when you exactly know that you are where you are meant to be, doing what He's asking you to do. And that doesn't move you, even if it is hard. That doesn't move you. But you need to just be quiet. Still mind, still heart. You need that as the air you breathe.
We have time for just one more question. Alma, I'm seeing your hand in the back for a moment.
Oh, me. Oh, so, right, sorry.
Yeah, thank you last year for the series of movies that you had. I learned to read into the symbolism. So thank you everyone on the panel today. But I don't know if anyone noticed in the movie, almost halfway through, it has a more of a dark tone. Right in the middle, when one of the workers, this is before the fire, after they get the land in New York, one of the workers comes out carrying some lumber, and his vest is bright red. At that point, the movie turns into a brighter tone of colors. And I realize that in that whole scene, it's Mother CABRINI who's not in the scene. The bright red to me symbolizes that she's going to suffer more. She's the only one who really knows it because she's a saint. And in every reading I've ever read about saints, saints know that they will be suffering because they're suffering for Jesus, because Jesus suffered for us, for the poor, the brokenhearted, all of that, the ones in pain. So I wondered if anybody here felt like I did, like, okay, she's doing so much, yet she knows she's still going to suffer, even though she gets this land. And now the colors in the movie are a little bit brighter. And everyone in the movie, I thought, in the theater, I thought that everything's going to go great now. Things are going to get better, but they don't. And she suffers more. So what can you say about all of us here who really want to be more like saints, but we don't want to suffer, or we're feeling suffering? So we just hold back. So really, I felt like whenever I've helped somebody and I've suffered because of it, it's like, oh no, I better just hold back because I don't want to suffer. It's like, what is this, dichotomy we have to, we want to do good for Jesus, but yet not to suffer too much.
I have to confess, thank you for seeing that. I will need to go back, watch the movie again. I actually didn't perceive that. It's wonderful that you did. Yeah, I can just offer something of my own perception. Those in Argentina we have a saying that you don't learn a thing if it doesn't go through your skin. And we all have different ways of learning. I believe that Father doesn't learn the same way I do, or Father Matt doesn't learn the same way I do. Okay. Good to see. I feel so bored. I never learned to. I'm very stubborn. So coming back on that, what I see is, I think I will repeat myself in what I just said. And this is also personal experience, and I guess it's a human experience. When you have that relationship with Jesus, you actually, the Lord is very wise. I always say that in the lessons He taught me, or in my journey with Him, had He told me what I was about to go through, I would just run away. Yeah, because it's scary sometimes. Yeah, but then the only thing that matters, or that I see, is that you see Him and you see that He called you. So that stillness, that silence, that relationship that confirms that you are where He wants you to be, doing what you need to do for Him, is what gives you the stability through that suffering, because you know that He is with you, even when you do not see Him. that's my own experience too. I mean, I guess that is the core of it. That's the core of it. Faith gives you something that is so strong. I will, St. Paul says that love is the best. I'll say faith. Yeah, love is there, but sometimes you don't feel love. And it's so dry and it's so overwhelming what you see around. But the certainty that he never failed you. He was not lying to you. And he is with you. And he went through that. And actually, what you get is to discover how much he loves me, but he wants me to go the same way he would. But now he's with me.
I will add this. You see the three of us up here, and the one thing that all of us have in common is that we've been asked to sacrifice our life for the mission. All right? So in our own ways, I can't speak for Father Matt, certainly can't speak for Sister, but we've dedicated ourselves in our own way towards furthering the mission of our Lord. All right? And when I first entered the seminary, or before I entered the seminary in the mid-late 90s, when I started doing spiritual direction, I was given books for spiritual reading. And if you look at the classics of spiritual reading, a lot of them are all about suffering. Right? It's always about suffering. And I told my spiritual director, ugh, this is so negative. It's really kind of hard to read this. But suffering comes in different ways. And for example, the three of us have dedicated ourselves in a very special way to serving. All right? And therefore it means that there are things that are requested of us to voluntarily surrender. And for most people, that's just not possible. These are good things on earth that are just not possible for the vast majority of people. But for those who are called and who believe that they can do it, God will give the grace. Now, as far as suffering is concerned, that's why the Catholic Church insists on having the crucifix very visible, because right here, the Picasso, the crucifix, the Christ of John of the Cross, it is always symbolic of the fact that no greater love has one than to die for one's friends. So in all circumstances, suffering is part and parcel of everyday life. I mean, our friends here from the shrine know that they always say to me, "You're limping," and I always say, "Well, it's either sciatica or arthritis. I'm not sure which one it is today." And I don't notice it as much as I used to, but it does hurt. But then people say, "Go see your doctor." So suffering comes in different ways. So it's not just this sacrificial. It's so romantic if you can do it. Give up a spouse and go to the missions. On the other hand, they're little ordinary things because it's not that heroic. There are everyday little details of people aren't returning phone calls, emails are piling up. I've got very angry people calling me. Where's my decision? Right? And they can be suffering, especially when people want an answer, they want it now. And it piles on top of you, and nobody knows what's in here and in here except for the one who's dealing with it. So suffering is a gift that ultimately I realize it's something we can learn from. Suffering is part and parcel of everyday life. So it's going to come whether you like it or not. Right? Let's get that straight. Suffering will come. But how do we do suffering? We filter it through the cross. A deep spiritual love that comes from our Lord and His most sacred heart. Right?
As a 36-year-old, I haven't had arthritis yet, so I haven't talked to you.
Don't tell my age.
But as I reflect on that question about how we prepare for suffering, I was really thinking about, there's an older woman, she comes to daily mass, and she's in her 90s, and her name's Maria, she's Polish, and some of you may know her. And she said to me the other day, I used to be afraid of suffering. I used to fear it. Now I thank God for it, and getting to suffer with and for somebody else, and offering my sufferings with Jesus and the cross, and just that sense of that. She really meant it, and it was really just. And I know that sounds really pious, but she said it, and she meant it, and it really. I think about it, and and honestly, at the 36-year-old, I haven't suffered that much, relatively speaking, and I have too much respect for suffering to say that I've done much of my own. But like, sometimes, you get the call to go to the hospital at 3 a.m. and just that, I've never regretted it, and it's always been such a beautiful gift to get to do that. I think about moms who raise kids and the suffering and the sacrifice that goes into that, and you never regret it. And there's always great beauty and a great gift there. And the gift of people who get up early in the morning and you go watch the missionaries, I say mass for them, and I'll sometimes volunteer with them, and you see them doing that day in and day out, and the great joy that they have. And it's just such a beautiful gift, sometimes to suffer for somebody else and to do that for somebody else. And it's just just reflecting on the fact that you'll never regret suffering for somebody else, you'll never regret suffering and giving your life to somebody else, and coming to understand that it is something to thank God for sometimes. Not always, obviously some suffering is
horrific, and I don't want to diminish it, but I'm thinking particularly of Maria and her witness that she gave to me.
Excellent. Thank you so much, everyone. If we could just say, Cheryl, did you have a quick comment?
Is there a particular biography of Mother Cabrini that you recognize? I want to learn more about her. Is there an author? There are several on.
Yeah, there are. We have one of Father Segundo Galilea, in weakness, strength. In weakness, strength. That's one. Then I know one that
Theodore Maynard, Too Small a World.
Okay, thank you.
And that's being published by Ignatius Press. That was the only one that was selected by Ignatius out of all the biographies that are out there, because it was written by an American.
And what's the last one, Theodore?
Maynard, M-A-Y-N-A-R-D. It's actually written from the American perspective, so it flows for an American reader.
Probably that one would be a happy one for this context, because Galilea is from Chile, so he will have another way of saying things.
Could you spell the last name of that one?
Galilea, Galilea. Galilea. That's it. It's very. I need to close my eyes and think because it's not the same way in Spanish. Sorry. I need to just, see it written.
Thank you. If everyone could join me in the ear hand.